a little bit difficult for me at the moment. Unfortunately, one of the little monitors isn't working in the front just, so it's difficult for me to see because we're using infrared lights only. So I'm looking into the dark. I have a peek in the back every now and again. So at the moment, I still find this quite amazing sometimes. Is you can literally see better than I can what's going on here, and you can see it at the same time as I can. And we've got these two little ones coming closer to us. Let me just put the other light on here, Rob. Let's get a bit of a rim light. Cool. This one's going to walk up to the car probably again. This guy's going to be so curious about us. Cool. Let the game drives now quickly. Station PCK is active, 2 adults and 1 pimpan's outside. Really are fascinating animals, hyenas. Very, very close family unit. Something we've mentioned before is that there's a very important or very strict social hierarchy in the group as well. Everything from your alpha female going down to your least dominant male in the group. What's also interesting is that all the females in the group are more dominant than any other male, so even your lowest ranking female in a clan of hyenas will still be higher ranked than the highest ranking male. We had an interesting question from Dawn Dillinger, if I have the surname correct. Dawn asked couple of questions about hyenas, about their anatomy, and about what they're related to as well. One of the things that have really sort of stumped people in the early days of studying hyenas is the fact that all the females have got what looks exactly like a male's penis as well. Even though it isn't a penis, it's a pseudo-penis, so it just looks like it. It's one of the things that confuse them. And it's also something that obviously makes you think that hyenas could be androgynous, or that maybe they don't need males in the group. Not the case. The females are still fully female and they still need a male to mate with them before they can give birth. And that obviously also raised a few interesting questions in terms of the taxonomy. How they're disappearing behind the car here. So I'm struggling to see what we're looking at the moment. These little young ones coming right up to the car here. I'll come back to the taxonomy just now, the family members to hyenas in a second. It's so funny, like little kids, they came sneaking up to the car and then a little movement and they scampered off again. Looking at one of the bigger hyenas. As I was saying, it makes it very interesting, the taxonomy questions behind it. Now, I'm not a biologist or a taxonomist myself, but it is something that I find interesting enough as far as the interesting parts of it go. Obviously, there's many different criteria by which animals are linked into groups or families, orders, depending on which part of it you look at. But the fact that female hyena also had what looked like penises obviously made that quite tricky. But when animals, or when scientists looked more into sort of the taxonomy of hyenas relative to the bone structures and the teeth and all the things they look at, normally bone structure and teeth structure being a very important part of it, I realized that hyenas were actually close related to mongooses. Now, if you want to simplify that, again, I'm not going to give you too many detailed, boring scientific information, partly because I find it a bit boring as well to go too much into it. But to simplify it, if you had your predators or your carnivores and you broke them up into dogs at the one end and cats at the other end, and in between you have your different steps, sort of as you move closer to one or the other. Not sure if that makes sense still to you. So let's say you've got dogs, you've got cats on the other end, then you'll have, in between, you'll have things like jackals. Obviously jackals would be quite close to dogs, or wolves, which essentially are dogs. You'll have all your cats, everything from a domestic house cat to a leopard or a lion, and then in between those you'll have things like your civets, genets, which are like mongooses. You'll have your different mongoose species, badgers, and so forth. Now hyenas fall in between basically your badgers and your mongoose. So you can say they're sort of almost between cats and dogs if you wanted to simplify it like that, but to be quite correct, they fit in just between your badgers and your mongooses. Fantastic, we're looking at that little guy again. I say little guy quite loosely. Could obviously be a little girl as well, quite difficult to see. When they're young it's even harder. As they get older and older you can normally see the females because they're bigger and they also behave more dominant within the clan. But that little one, you can see him compared to the older cousins. Big enough now to start coming out as well. He's starting to get his spots. These are spotted hyena, just in case you weren't sure which species of hyena this is. And he's now getting big enough to start becoming curious about his surroundings and his environment. Start playing around, leave the den at night. Something he's been anxiously waiting for. Up to a few weeks ago still, we'd sit here in the morning sometimes. And the other two would be running around the den, playing outside, and he'd be sitting right at the entrance, dying to come out, but not quite big and confident enough to do so. It's nice to see the smaller one also joining the outside fun. Just out of interest sake, the other species of hyena that you get, very different from spotted hyena. They're not as, or they don't live in such big groups or big clans like these guys do. In southern Africa you get the brown hyena, which are normally almost solitary unless you get a male and female mating or something like that. Very different from the spotted hyena also in their social behavior. You don't have the female dominance as much. So your brown hyena, and then also your aardwolf, which is a little smaller species of hyena. A big aardwolf would be about the size of this youngster we're looking at now. And aardwolf are purely termite eaters. And then in North Africa you also get the striped hyena, North and East Africa. This is fantastic looking at them like this. They pretty much unaware of us. They came to investigate the car once or twice. They might do so again just now. Most young animals, but hyenas especially, they're incredibly curious little animals, so they do find everything in their surroundings worthwhile investigating. But at the moment they've got something to play with in whatever they're looking at in the bottom of that hole. And it really is awesome to see them like this. They, like I said, not really aware of us. We don't have a big spotlight on them. They're just in their natural environment. It's pretty much dark out here now, and we're just silently looking on, totally not intruding, or not intruding at all into their world. It's a very good part of being out here if you can integrate into the wild area or into the wilderness in such a way that you become part of it in a non-intrusive way. In other words, we're not influencing things in any direction. We're not helping predators or helping prey species or chasing animals around.